we apprehend it to be the whole of the works and buildings on the York estate in this parish. Nobody who saw them ever forgot the plantation fires. They would burn and reignite across northwestern Jamaica for the better part of 2 weeks, and rain a curtain of ash down on the trees. Various awe-struck witnesses described them as one solid mass of flame, a vast furnace. The skies lighted up in all directions, a chain of signaling lamps that seemed the fruits of a biblical judgment. The whole country, concluded a minister, seemed given up to destruction. More than 200 blazes were reported in the opening days of the revolt, and in the daytime they magnified the glare of the tropics and tinted the sun with menace as an organized army of enslaved people held their masters hostage and fought off attacks from the volunteer militia. The gathering inferno frightened George Lawson to the point that he ordered his post abandoned. "I am convinced the contest must be decided in the streets of Montego Bay," he hurriedly wrote the governor before he left for the countryside to link up with another regiment. Professional British soldiers sailed into the harbor 3 days later and quickly became ensnared in a guerrilla war they were ill-prepared to fight. Many of them expressed astonishment at the military talent of the enslaved people, who outnumbered whites on the island by 10 to 1. The rebels built a fortress atop Greenwich Hill and won at least one direct head-to-head confrontation on the battlefield. Indicating an unprecedented level of preparation, some of the dead fighters were found wearing uniforms, blue coats with red sashes. The entire plantation society of Jamaica came under attack in the largest revolt it had ever faced. One of the richest sugar growers in Jamaica, Richard Barrett, watched the fires with mounting fear from a house in Montego Bay. A fierce defender of slavery, he was the cousin of the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and well-connected in British society. Barrett scratched out a note to the colonial governor on the 4th night of the insurrection. "The militia to a man are zealous and loyal, and no praise can be too high for their courage and conduct." A hint of his panic, however, can be seen in the drops of ink carelessly spilled onto his note. It is supposed that 100 plantations and settlements are already in ashes, Barrett wrote. "If the rebellion spreads, our force is quite insufficient to put it down. All depends on the moral effect of the employment of the king's troops. 5 rebels have been tried by court-martial and shot. A woman also condemned was spared. I think she should be hanged." Those first nights full of fire touched off 5 weeks of burning, looting, crop destruction, courts-martial, on-the-spot executions, severed heads mounted atop poles, and outright human hunting for sport that shook slaveholding Jamaica to its foundations and sent authorities on a manhunt for the renegade Baptist deacon Samuel Sharp, who had told his followers the revolt would be a peaceful sit-down strike, only to watch it gyrate out of control and erupt into an inferno. The violence created alarming newspaper headlines across the ocean, forcing Richard Barrett to return to London to answer for the embarrassment in an attempt to save the 3-century-old institution of British slavery. But he could not. The costs were too high. The violence on the Christmas holiday played a central role in convincing the British public that slavery could no longer be countenanced and spurring them to demand change from a dysfunctional parliament. The effects would also ripple in the United States, where politicians with Southern sympathies had just weathered the revolt of Nat Turner in Virginia and seen how Sharp's rebellion in Jamaica had led directly to British abolition. Periodic slave insurrections were taken as a fact of life in Jamaica, even as a routine cost of doing business. But Sharp's movement was different. Resistance on a dazzling scale. It was well organized, spread across a wide geographic area, and